But before we get into it, big birthday shout out to the one and only Mike Miller, the killer. Uh, my boy Big Mike, you know, we went to school together for a good amount of time, and his birthday was a couple days ago, 18th. But I'll never forget my sophomore year of high school. I was pretty light in the behind, playing a one tech in a time where most of the linemen up there up in Massachusetts were bigger guys. I wouldn't even say tall. It's more so they were heavy guys, like 6'1", 6'2", a lot of 5'10" guys, very big, 300, whatever. But yeah, Mike, it was Mike, and he was a guard, and his center was pretty much the same size as him. And I mean, they combo blocked me to HE double hockey sticks during one my the biggest game of my sophomore year, which was a rivalry game. But yeah, big shout out to Big Mike. And another birthday shout out we got for TI. We got our brave men and women outside doing their job. That's the second one I seen drive by. So hopefully everybody's taken care of. But big shout out to TI, Terrell Ivory, basketball extraordinaire. He really had a big imprint on us because he was our dorm parent in our dorm of crazy boys. But Ti's a good dude, man, family man. He's got the team looking good this year. And I want my one-on-one. I played Ti one-on-one one time before I had a girls varsity practice. I was a practice player for like a year and a half, 2 years. And I saw him basically getting ready to have his practice after. We played one-on-one to three. I had like a rim out. And then I missed like a shot I should have made, but it was a good shot though. Like I know he looked at me like, oh, like he didn't know I had that. Then he gamed me, as they say. So it was 3-0 Ti, but that's not the point, bro. The point is, Ti, you're the man. Happy birthday, Ti. Happy belated to yourself and to Big Mike. Now, the national championship game. By the time this episode comes out, the Natty will probably have already been played. However, I'm still going to be previewing the game because I can't see into the future, or maybe I can. I think that first and foremost, we have to really move the microscope back and look at the job that Ryan Day has done with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. After they lost to NIU, a lot of people were out on them. It was an early loss, and obviously there was the running joke about how him and the coach from NIU had a phone call, and he told him basically how he beat him. And since then, they have not lost a game. Maybe he really did tell him exactly how he beat him, and that was what it was. But Notre Dame has fought through tremendous hardships. They have injuries all across the team. Last week they played, and Riley Leonard left with like a head injury in like the second quarter, and he came back and he played very strong. They have had injuries in the secondary, which have led to players kind of rotating. I mean, really anywhere you point to, there's been injuries. And Notre Dame, the job that Marcus Freeman has done, people talk about culture, people talk about leader of men, all of these idioms, essentially these football idioms that have just become part of our vocabulary and our vernacular. But Marcus Freeman is walking the walk. If you are a fan of the Fighting Irish, obviously you like having extra money in your pocket due to not being in a conference. That's a big debate right now, if the Fighting Irish should be in a conference. But again, you have like Army and Navy and like all these other schools that are also non-conference. I'm not sure what we can do about that, to be honest. I don't have the answer for that, but there was a suggestion the other day, I think from like Joel Klatt, maybe Rare Joel Klatt W, where he talked about how the Army Navy game should kick off college football, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think that Notre Dame gets lost in the fray a lot because they're not in the conference. Also, those other unconference schools get lost in it. And Army and Navy were as good as they've ever been this past year, and we didn't really get to see it as much as we should have. They were so good at football. As good as they've been respectively since Keenan Reynolds was, lighting it up. And so I think that if we open the season with that game, yeah, week 0, make it a week 0 game. Make Army and Navy a week 0 game. I think it'd be awesome. This game is going to be decided by the Ohio State defense versus the Notre Dame offense. And the reason that I say that is because Ohio State has a fast and physical defense. All their guys up front are really fast, really strong. Jack Sawyer is a guy who came in with massive expectations, right? It's not easy to follow the Chase Youngs and the Bosa brothers of the world, but even Sam Hubbard, Sam Hubbard doesn't get his just due, but Sam Hubbard was was a dog at Ohio State, and he came into the league, and he eventually, I think, might have had some All Pro seasons, and is still playing very strong football. So it's Jack Sawyer came in with all his expectations, and he didn't necessarily live up to them stat wise, production wise, as far as defeating Michigan did not really happen, right? But he's embodied what it's meant to be a leader for that Columbus team, and I think that um, Caleb Downs is the best. I think Caleb Downs might be the best player in college football on the defensive side of the football. Caleb Downs is very fast. He's sideline to sideline. He is a threat when he's in the box. He can play on the back end really, really well. He reminds me of Cam Chancellor. He also reminds me of a little bit of Brian Branch. He's again really rangy. A lot to like about a guy like Caleb Downs, and he's strong. He's physical. You see pictures of him, and it's hard to believe him and Josh Downs are brothers. Josh Downs is a strong guy, but Caleb Downs was definitely eating a little bit more when they were growing up. Um, if Jeremiah Love can continue to kind of be the engine and help establish that run game, then it really opens things up. Him and Riley Leonard are both going to receive opportunities to run the football. But again, that's going to tell a tale because Ohio State's offense, in my opinion, has too much to fail. We saw that last week when they played against Texas. Texas was a renowned defense, right? But even with taking away Jeremiah Smith, was kind of like a lot of the bracketing and whatever terminology they have for their coverage, whatever, right? Like taking away Jeremiah Smith and essentially living with the damage that the two backs do and the damage that Egbuka and the tight end Scott can do. Ohio State is still efficient. Will Howard has the biggest chance, I think, out of all the players to improve his draft stock because it is a quote unquote weak quarterback draft, right? I think that Will Howard is a guy that you like. You see Bo Nix's success. You see Joe Burrow's success. You see Jaden Daniels' success. Three guys who were successful at multiple schools and then successful in the league as what they would consider slightly older quarterbacks or whatever, right? Will Howard was very, very good at K-State. He ran a great system. And now playing for Ohio State, he has an opportunity here. If he can prove that he is more than a game manager, maybe if he can prove that he is the reason or one of the reasons for the winning, and he's not just on the ride for the win, then I think that he can maybe even sneak into the early second round. I don't think that he's a first round quarterback. Even he can have the game of his life. I don't think he's going to be a first round Q, but I think that again he can really make himself a second round Q. I think right now, realistically, he's probably looking at like a third round, mid third round, late third round grade with the loss here. Again, yeah, Jeremiah Love was probably one of my favorite players as a back from the back position. So again, if he can get off for Notre Dame, that'll make things a lot easier. But if he is not really maybe having a good game, I think the key for them is going to be Jordan Faison, the dual athlete they have, recently coming off of a championship for the lacrosse team. Jordan Faison has been one of their brightest spots. So if he can get going, he can get the ball. I think that he can also open some things up for Notre Dame. I'll take Ohio State in the game. I think they have too much to lose as it is right now, but I also thought that about Michigan, right? Two things about Ohio State. One, Ryan Day might have the hottest seat in college football, and we'll talk about that in a second. But two, the Michigan team that they lost to, right? That was, I think Michigan might have been like 7-5. The Michigan team that they lost to was going through a lot. They lost a lot. Yes, you gain Wink Martindale on defense. You have Sharon Moore as a head coach who's serving sanctions from the whole Connor Stallion saga, right? He misses the first game. He's also taking over for Jim Harbaugh, who finally got over the hump. He was 8-4, I think, his first couple seasons in Michigan, kept losing to Ohio State, gets over the hump, beats them back to back. Finally, he wins a national championship. He goes to the NFL. You also lose coaches like Jesse Minter, right? You lose a lot of production from players. You lose a guy on defense like Mikey Sainristil, who has been excellent for the Commanders and who I wanted the New York Giants to take a look at. Probably didn't happen, right? Um, Ohio State is a job that's very coveted because if you want to go to a school where you can make money, where you can be cool, where you can be the man, and where you can play excellent football, you want to go to a school like Ohio State. And it's funny because you look at another $20 million roster like Oregon, right? And the question with Oregon is why not Oregon? Because Oregon plays in the Big Ten. So, yes, they were Big Ten champs, but they have to travel so far for every single game. Mick Cronin was just going off about this with basketball because gets really bad with basketball. You play 3 games a week. With football, you can play it off when it's 1 game a week, right? You travel and you just tell yourself you're traveling. But with basketball and those other sports, it can become a bigger issue. Mick Cronin also recently called out his guys in the presser. I'm going to get to Mick Cronin when I get to basketball. But yeah, Ryan Day might lose his job. I think that if they win the game, you're Ryan Day. You say, I won the game. I find that I'm a champion. You can't take that from me. But the problem is you have to excel. You have to go to a different place. Dan Hurley won a championship, then he won another championship. But when he went to the Maui Invitational recently, he lost all his games. He was heavily scrutinized, and you could see it affecting him. And the problem is, in Hurley's case, you have now it's championship or bust, but in a different way than it's championship or bust for other guys who haven't even really tasted what you've tasted. We know what you're capable of. So in Ryan Day's case, even if he hasn't proven per se in the past, quote unquote, what he's capable of, he's at the helm of what is a multi-million-dollar operation. He is at the helm of a $20 million roster. His coaching staff, if you include all of his coaches, all of the analysts, and all of his assistants are making multi-million dollars as well. So he's in charge of a lot. And so if he doesn't produce this year, there's going to be some people who want his job. In the same way that Texas next year has got to win the national championship. You have Arch Manning. You're gonna be a very coveted destination for transfers, if not already. You still have Steve Sarkisian. You'll lose some coaches as you always do, but with the roster that they have, with the expectations that they have, and how close they got this year, if you're Texas next year, you have to win. So Ryan Day has to win this year. If he doesn't win, I don't see him at Ohio State anymore. If he does win, I think he gets 1 or 2 more years at Ohio State and then he's gone, you know. Or it turns into Dabo Swinney, right? Dabo Swinney won years ago, and since then he hasn't really been remotely close. But he's gotten off, but he's gotten a pass media wise. No one in the media is calling for Dabo Swinney's job. You know, he's won. He's a made man, and the Clemson job is not as heavily scrutinized or as in the public eye as an Ohio State job. Before we talk men and women's basketball at the collegiate level, quick shout out to Messiah, all caps, exclamation point at the end. If you guys are into rap music that has the culture and soul behind it that makes you feel like you're sitting on a porch talking to somebody about the parable of their life, you need to listen to Messiah. The Villain Wins by Messiah won a lot of accolades in 2024. And I was really excited to see him perform some of the songs. Unfortunately he missed the concert that I was at. It was a Mavi show, and it was Mavi and all his Kill Switch friends. But the Burden of Truth, sorry, Burden of Truth by Messiah is easily one of my favorite songs right now. And and he's killing it, you know. Drop some albums or some songs that you like in the comments below, so I can see if y'all really listening to that good music. Because I can guarantee I listen to some good music. I can't say I'm no DJ, but I got a lot of records in the house, and people have told me that sometimes my music be hitting in the car. So I'll be listening to good music. But let me know what y'all be listening to in the comments. Women's college basketball. Let's talk about highlights for a second. So women's college basketball and women's basketball in general is growing to a place that it has not grown to in the past, as far as numbers, as far as eyes, as far as notoriety, whatever you want to call it. More people are watching than they've ever watched. And some people have always watched, some people have always watched in limited capacity. Some people have always watched in full participatory capacities. But the point remains that highlights are the most misleading thing on the planet, right? You could watch Tiago Splitter highlights, and someone who doesn't understand basketball would say Tiago Splitter was better than Tim Duncan. And you would say, what are you talking about? And they would pull up Tiago Splitter's ultimate highlights compilation. And that video alone would convince you of that. So if you are new-ish to covering women's basketball or even appreciating women's basketball, please don't get lost in highlights the same way and if you do get lost in highlights, please understand that that makes you an average or a casual fan. So when we have discussions like this, you have to just sit on the side and listen. And there's nothing against you on that. But uh Keomi McMiller for Rutgers has been playing really, really interesting basketball in the sense that she's accumulated some great highlights, right? She has great dribble skills. She can get to the paint. She can shoot the ball. And I would say she has like her own personal flair. Now, some of the issues here, okay, if you remember, maybe a couple weeks ago, McMiller was sat. She got a DNP versus excuse me, she got a DNP versus USC and Juju Watkins, and she was unable to play against them because of some decisions that she had made. Okay. And the thing is, if you get a DNP, right, you don't take it to social media. She took it to social media. She apologized to her fan base. She says, sorry, guys, I couldn't play this game, XYZ, XYZ. Um, you don't have, I mean, yeah, you have fans, right? But you're not bigger than the program. You're just not, you can't do something like that in a world like this when your next step is going to be the portal. In women's college basketball, there aren't really one and done. So you have to play basketball next year. And a coach is going to have to accept you. And if it's not your coach, the next coach is going to be like, well, that's the player who did this, right? Don Staley probably thinks you play great, but you see Malaysia Fulwiley, who is a comp for you, right? You guys play very similar basketball, probably a better scorer than Fulwiley. Fulwiley probably gets to the paint and distributes the ball better. But Don Staley's not going to accept you with that kind of attitude, right? Sorry to my fans. You got people in your quote unquote camp retweeting it and reposting it. It sets a strange precedent for future players. And we don't know what happened behind the scenes, right? We don't know what exactly it was that led to her getting the DNP from her coach. But the fact remains, you got the DNP. So at least while the season's going on, right? Maybe don't act like you're bigger than the program. Then you watch her highlights from her next game. 14 for 28. I think she had like 35 points. So you had 35 points on 28 shots. Congratulations. Okay. You're a point guard. That shouldn't happen. And you see in some of the clips, I mean, I'd like to imagine, some of the reasons that she was trying to pull up from half court is that they were playing zone. So she was trying to, you shoot enough times, you see him fall enough times, you force him to stop playing zone, stop letting you shoot the ball. But her teammates were jumping up and down in the corner. They were wide open, like jumping up and down in the corner, asking for the pill. Yeah, so you don't want to see that. But that's freshman basketball. That's the beauty of basketball, McMiller is probably 18 or 19, so she has a lot of room to grow. But I don't want people to watch highlights and think she's being held back or that she's the best player in college basketball, because there are a lot of players who are better than she is realistically at that level. And I think that she can be the best though, She kind of reminds me of a Kennedy Carter a little bit in the way that she carries herself, in the way that she has that chip. Um, Speaking of players who are going to probably be first team All-Americans and high draft picks, I want to talk about three players: Anissa Morrow, Olivia Miles, and Hannah Hidalgo. First of all, let's talk about Olivia Miles. Olivia Miles is a player who for the positivity or the positive end of highlights actually benefited because she was doing some really cool stuff in the AAU circuit as a high schooler, and she played at Blair Academy in New Jersey, which plays some of the highest level of competition. And I think because she was also at a school that had high quality boys, I think she might have been there at the same time as like Kyle Cuff. Like because she also had those eyes, um, people were a little bit hip to her, I think. And then she lost some time with like a little injury. But she's always been so good, in my opinion. I think size, right, skill, dexterity, and now this year, her and her doggo and Coach Ivy have Notre Dame in a position to compete for a national championship. And so we're going to start to see some of that fire in Miles that could maybe have her go as high as 2 or 3 in the draft. I think that Morrow should go 2, and I think that Beckers is going to go 1. I think AZ Fudd and Beckers going 1 and 2 is no longer realistic because of injuries to Fudd. You have to think about how that would affect somebody's confidence. And then like bringing you in as a top 6, 7 pick, you have to help change the franchise. I think what's better for AZ Fudd is if she comes into the NBA, excuse me, WNBA in more of a like, at least usage wise, more of a Camila Cardozo role. I think it's probably not good for her body or for her mental to be expected to come in and to be somebody's Caitlin Clark. It's just not going to happen. Um, but Olivia Miles is like she's like one of those players that you have on your team, and the next year, regardless of your record, you go, well, we have her on our team. She reminds me of Rakia Jackson in the way she plays. I really like the balance that she plays with. And again, I think that Notre Dame has a shot this year. Anissa Morrow was probably the highest IQ basketball player that was on LSU's team last year. I think that, you know, realistically, Angel Reese is a really good player. Flagg is really good. Um, they have a lot of talented players, and Kim Mulkey as a basketball mind is very polished, but Anissa Morrow can just do things on all sides of the court in such an easy way, and she can get a 2020 game, one game, and the next game she can have 30 points and 0 rebounds. And the next game she can have 10 points and 10 assists and 5 blocks. She's all over the court. And this year, LSU has not lost a game. And I think that Morrow is the engine behind that. But all those other pieces I mentioned before, like Flagg and Makayla Williams, like they're chugging this year. So it'll be funny to see the collision course, because the natural collision course for LSU in the SEC is always who? Dawn Staley, right? Kim Mulkey's got to be tired of Dawn Staley at this point. I know she is, but let's see what it looks like this year when they finally go head to head. I'm excited to see that. Let's continue to monitor the draft. Again, I think that Hidalgo could go really high in the draft, but realistically, realistically, Hannah Hidalgo is 5'6", and she went viral this summer for some inflammatory remarks that she made about, um, you know, gay players. And statistically, there are a lot of gay players, both at the collegiate and professional level. So for her to say that was just not a good representation of herself or the university, but also, again, statistically, would just put her in a poor situation as like a locker room presence going forward. So something to monitor for her doggo if she slips in the draft at all, or if a team heavily considers that in not taking her. Finally, for today's episode of In the AM with MC, let's talk about the men's NCAA. If you're a Michigan fan, you gotta love Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf plays like Nikola Jokic, 7-foot guard, Yale graduate transfer. He's got this nice slow wiggle to him, and he can shoot the outside shot very well. But his best attribute is very Jokic-like, and it is his ability to play that big pick and roll. When he's the initiator of that 4-5 pick and roll, and he plays downhill, there's really not anyone who wants to get in front of him. If they overcommit, it's very similar to Jokic. He can get that spin move, and he can either find the pass where he wants it, or you're playing one-on-one versus Danny Wolf, and no one wants to do that. It'll be interesting to see what he continues to add to his bag going forward, because Michigan has started to develop a history of, oh, they've always really had a history of bigger players who can handle the ball, but then when they get to the league, they kind of add something else. So the Wagner brothers are perfect examples. Franz was really strong at getting to the cup at Michigan, but when he got to the Magic, he developed this ability to get to the cup at his own speed. So now when he plays for the Magic, you see him play off 2 feet a lot more. You see him do a lot more veer steps and slow steps. And Franz Wagner is on his way to, along with Paolo Banchero, are on their way to being like a 25-point duo, which you really don't see that often in the NBA. You see a lot of like 20, 25s. I think Klay Thompson and Steph Curry were that for a bunch of years, a 20 and a 25. But you don't really see, I think Brunson and Cat were like one of the only 25s now. You don't see that a lot. The other night, Michigan did lose on a buzzer beater to Iowa State. We'll get you back, Cyclones. But Danny Wolf is a force to be reckoned with. Michigan's a force this year. I'm not sure how far they go in the tournament, but I just know that most teams don't want to see them. As far as teams that look good right now, Auburn is one. Auburn's got to love their class they have coming in. They have like 3 or 4 top 50 commits. That's not in there. They're going to have some portal additions, as people always do. But you don't want to see that team in your same state in the SEC championship. You definitely don't want to see them in the tournament. Alabama yet again has made their way into relevancy in college basketball. Nate Oates has done another great coaching job. You got Sears, you got Nelson, you got these strong, intelligent basketball players. Some more seasoned guys as well. That'll probably spell issues for a team like Duke. Duke is another team that's looking really good early. I think they're third right now in the AP poll. But Cooper Flagg is coming into his own. I mentioned this on the last episode. He's a real freshman. He's a freshman in college. So he plays freshman basketball for the most part. But the thing is, his floor is miles above the ceiling for most guys that are even playing collegiate basketball, let alone in his own realm, on his own team, things like that. So Duke looks good. Alabama looks good. Coach Calipari looks terrible. The Arkansas Razorbacks look really, really bad. And these are the kind of situations where you ask yourself, is NIL the problem? Because the answer is no. There's so many things we can work on with NIL as far as regulations, as far as what we do going forward. And the NCAA courts have made some recent rulings, and the Supreme Courts have made some recent rulings that will impact NIL for years to come. But the problem with Calipari is always Calipari. I've never seen a coach have more talented players as consistently and always come up short in these ways that he does. He's 0-5 in SEC play with his first year with Arkansas. He left Kentucky after a long time there, and obviously it wasn't on great terms. But he went over to Arkansas with the biggest booster that he had from Kentucky, and basically all the money he could want access to. He has most of the roster that he had at Kentucky, plus some other guys who are supposed to be this and this and this. But he can't make it gel. Calipari can't make it gel. Every single time, he can't make it gel. And I would have to be very skeptical of him if I was like a fan of his. I'm not a fan of I'm not like a personal fan of John Calipari. I think he's a phenomenal coach. It's great to see what he was able to do in the collegiate realms, like, before I was born, before I was tapped into sports the way I am now. And then I lived through a lot of his greatness. He's cemented. I was there for the 38-1 team. They were coached as well as he has done. But this year's team is coached as poorly as he's done. And you have to ask yourself, what's going to change? What's going to change for Calipari? What's going to change for the Arkansas Razorbacks? You can't continue like this. If you have a roster that costs that much, you can't continue like this. Playing in the SEC, you can't continue like this. Final shout out before we get out of here for Josh Gray of Missouri, the horse. He is one of the best players to watch. If you love basketball, you want to get better, but you don't get a lot of shots on your team, because Josh Gray is down there laying the lumber. He's getting the boards. He's doing the dirty work. And he's probably the most important player for Missouri going forward. Episode 3, IntheAMwMC, gone.